Can you imagine creating a complete and functional Blazor application, applying complex design patterns, and splitting projects like a professional just by conversing with your code editor? In this video, I will unleash the explosive power of GitHub Copilot, using its new features to transform a simple password method into a modular and scalable system. You will see in record time how I design an algorithm factory, separate the logic into a class library, and deploy a dynamic web interface. All while the AI suggests code, fixes bugs, and accelerates the process like an elite copilot. Ready to see the future of programming? Don't miss a second of this demonstration that will make your keyboard sizzle with productivity. Let's get started. We will start by analyzing this GitHub site, the GitHub blog, where we have this news indicating that due to Microsoft's 50-year anniversary, the rollout of the Agents mode with support for MCP service has been launched for all Visual Studio Code users. A plan called GitHub Copilot Pro Plus is also being announced, which basically allows us to make a higher request for different code queries that we can perform as part of this new feature in Visual Studio Code. And you may be wondering what this Agents mode is. Well, we will analyze it as we progress through this video. You can see here information about the description of what this Agents mode is, what models are available, and other details. Also, information regarding the different prices available or the various subscriptions needed to utilize this service. Let's go to Visual Studio Code now. I have previously created a new folder that you can see on screen. It is completely empty. And this is intentional because we will explore different features of Visual Studio with GitHub Copilot that currently exists to facilitate simpler development, a more accessible development. A concept also known as live coding, which is very trendy and basically involves creating applications using only natural language. How can we do this with Visual Studio? Well, the first step is to log in with our account. I currently have my GitHub Pro account available, so I have a certain number of requests I can make with the premium models as they are called. And basically, we will see this throughout this video. What I will do next is create a new project as part of this new folder, and for that I will indicate that I want a new terminal window. Here, I will run a command that I have prepared beforehand, which allows us to create a new console project called Password Generator. So I press Enter. This generates the project structure. We can see here a file called program.cs. It's nothing fantastic. I will replace the code in this class with the code that I created earlier, which you can see on the screen. Basically, this code simply generates a password by invoking this method called generatePassword, which I have defined a little further down. It's a very simple method that just takes a length to create the password and also a set of characters that have been defined beforehand to allow us to generate a simple or complex password. And basically this is what the generatePassword method does. One of the first functionalities we have from GitHub Copilot is that there are a series of quick actions we can execute by simply pressing a few buttons. For example, let's select this method called generatePassword. I right-click, and you can see we have a section called Code Pilot. This section is already available in the latest versions of Visual Studio Code. Previously, you had to install an extension separately to access all these features, but nowadays you can have it integrated into Visual Studio Code. We see that we have a series of different quick actions that we can execute. For example, let's say we are new developers who don't know much about the language, and we're unsure about what this method we're looking at does. Well, we can indicate that we want the AI models to explain what this method refers to. So I execute this first action called explain, and something interesting happens here. A new chat window has opened. Here you can see it says chat. Another very interesting thing is that the workspace is automatically tagged with the context we are currently in. This provides more context to the AI model about what we want to do, where we are, what the code is, etc. Notice that the next step involves executing a command that allows us to be more explicit about requesting an explanation for a specific piece of code. We have a pre-created prompt indicating that an explanation should be generated for the active selection in paragraphs or text, with the context being the previously selected code. And then this is the initial prompt. Next, we have the AI model's response, and you can see that we have an explanation of what this method does. I'm going to enlarge this a bit. We have different descriptions of what each parameter does, what string builder, for example, refers to, what random means, etc., etc. Another very interesting thing is that each of these tags takes us directly to the piece of code where the reference is located. For example, if we select length, you can see how this keyword is automatically selected as part of the application or the file we're in. The same goes for characters, random, etc. This happens with each of the different references that have been obtained thanks to the AI model. And we will examine this window a bit more later. For now, I will close this window. You have seen how this method has been explained to us in a very simple way, explaining what it does. So if you had very complicated code, you could simply through a button get a detailed explanation about what this method is doing and how it works. You could also provide feedback on those chat messages to get more specific information, for example about a specific class or how it could be improved, etc. Once we have seen this explained command, there is also another command called fix to address certain issues that may exist in your code. For example, let's suppose that as part of this password generator, we don't want this line that allows us to add a character to be part of the final password. If we remove this, we know that it will not function correctly because it will return an empty string builder, as we haven't attached any new character. So let's see if the AI model can fix this issue. We will indicate that we want Copilot to fix the problem we saw earlier. Another interesting thing that has happened here is that this chat window has appeared directly in the document we're in. It hasn't appeared as a separate chat window, as we saw earlier. But we will look into this a bit more later. And here I want you to see that we have the fix command that will allow us notice to propose a solution for the issues in the selected code. And here, something that I also find very interesting is that not only has the problem we encountered earlier been solved, which we caused on purpose, but here the initial prompt, the prompt made by the user, or well, code in this case, provides us with a series of suggestions and instructions that could improve this code. So for example, we see that it indicates this expression new could be simplified. Also, a local function can be made static. We also have an unnecessary assignment to the variable POS, etc. So from this initial prompt, which has been automatically generated by Visual Studio Code, we have a response, and you can see that several issues have been resolved. Several lines of code have been simplified, various elements have been optimized, and primarily, this line has been re-added, allowing us to attach the character to the final password. As part of this window that appeared here, we can accept these changes, and if we click on Close, we can exit without applying the changes. We could regenerate the response that was generated. We have other actions, such as carrying out the view in the chat, etc. We could also change the model if we wanted to. We see that there are many models available today. You can even configure your own, or rather a model with your own data or with your own service key that you wish to use so that you have no restrictions when using those types of models. Well, here we will indicate that we want to accept these changes and we already have corrected code. Let's do a next demonstration for that. I will return to the code we had earlier, and once again, I will remove this line that allows adding characters to the generated password. And this is because I want to execute the next command. The next command is called review and comment. I will execute this command, and basically this command allows us to instruct the AI model to review, line by line, each line of code we have, analyze it, and provide suggestions for correcting or solving any issues we might have. For example, we may see comments from GitHub Copilot indicating that the generate password function is not adding any characters to the string builder. And basically, this is the problem that we have created automatically. So it is indicating what changes should be applied to resolve this issue. We'll indicate, okay, yes, I want to apply this change. Go to the next one. Notice that we have 3 possible problems in this code. Next, you can see that we have another suggestion indicating that this call, or rather this section of code, generates a random index, but the corresponding character from the string is not being used. And well, it gives us another suggestion on how we could optimize this. Let's indicate that we want to apply the change. And we have one last suggestion telling us to use random.shared instead of new random. This is suggested because it could lead to a generation of weak random numbers or passwords. So this is more recommended. We indicate that we want to apply the changes. And now it continues to generate more suggestions for some additional code snippets. We indicate that we do want to apply the changes. And with this, notice that a summary has been automatically generated to indicate what this method does, and it has been corrected based on the suggestions provided by GitHub Copilot. Another functionality we have available. I'm going to remove this comment. We could also generate documentation for a specific section of code. For example, to generate documentation for this method, we'll indicate that we want to generate the documents, and through this command, a new summary will be created based on this method. We'll indicate that we want to keep these changes. Here, it placed the summary in a position where I don't want it. So I will cut and paste the comment above the method that interests me. And in this way, we now have the summary for this method. Finally, another option we have available is to add unit tests. For example, if I select this method again, I will indicate that I want to execute this functionality to generate tests. And you can see that what this has done is add a new file called program.test.cs. And basically this method, or rather this generation, has created a series of different classes and methods with the fact attribute, which would allow us to carry out unit tests for this method. I will accept these changes, save the file, and you can see that we now have the file called program.cs available. However, something interesting we can notice is that we have some errors here, and let's assume that we are inexperienced developers. We might think that this code is correct and that there is or rather that it is incorrect, that there is some kind of issue. We note that this code is fine, but if we position ourselves over one of the errors marked by Visual Studio Code, we can see that we have a quick option that says Fix with Copilot. So we will indicate that we want to solve this problem with Copilot. You can see that this displays a chat window indicating that this is happening, possibly because it indicates we need to install NuGet packages that have not been added. As you can see, it is displaying a console command section where we can perform various actions using these quick actions, such as inserting this code into a terminal. We can also insert it where the cursor is located, etc. In my case, since these are console commands, I will indicate that I want to insert them into the terminal and see if this resolves the issue. So I have already done that. Let's go to the bottom of the terminal, and you can see that this gave us an error indicating that this command is not recognized. So what can we do? Well, we can copy this error and tell Copilot, I have this error. Press enter and you can see that it starts thinking about what this could be or what might be causing the problem. You can see that it generates a new response, indicating that it is likely being caused by spaces in the file path. So it has suggested a new console command here. Let's try to execute it once again. You can see that this time the installation of the required NuGet package is being carried out, which has resolved the errors in this file, except for one error I see here related to the string builder. Once again, let's use Fix using Copilot to see what Copilot suggests to solve the problem. And it indicates that we needed to add this namespace as part of the file, giving us a completely valid file. Let's see if this project compiles correctly. And you can see that we have a successful build, which means we have improved our code, or rather we have seen some quick actions we can perform with Copilot to achieve better code. Now we have noticed different windows appearing while we perform some quick actions. And the first window I want to discuss is the Inline Chat editor. Basically, this window allows you to ask questions and get suggestions directly in the editor or receive help on shell commands in an integrated terminal. This window is very useful when you want to work directly in the same file you are in. You can open this window by pressing Ctrl-I. Here we have this window called Inline Chat. Let's try using it. To do this, let's return to program.cs and suppose we want to minify this method called generatePassword. So let's press Ctrl-I and we will indicate minify the method using literals instead of names. We press enter and this starts the process of generating or minifying this method. And you can see how all the words or variable names have been replaced by literals, resulting in less readable code, which I don't know what purpose that would serve, but we gave that instruction and it was fulfilled perfectly. I will indicate that I want to cancel these changes. And another thing we could also do is reference some external files using the hash symbol. For example, we could say add a test in, and here we can reference program.test.cs, and we will indicate to check if a password is weak. We press enter, and you can see that since we referenced a different external file, it has automatically opened here. Here we have program.test.cs, and it has created this method that we will accept and make available here. We are seeing some errors marked here in the code because they were created outside of the class. I will cut them and paste them as part of this first class, which allows us to carry out the generation of different unit tests. Here they are. And you can see that we no longer have any errors. All the code is completely valid and has been generated correctly, thanks to the external reference we applied. Another interesting point is that this inline chat also works within a terminal. For example, let's display the terminal and press Ctrl-I once more. You can see that this shows us inline chat to carry out some type of operation or ask a question. For example, we could ask, how can I add a new class from the console? And it will start to think about how to add a new class. And here it indicates what we need to do. We need to copy this command, which you can see on the screen, or we can insert it directly here. Let's copy it. I will paste it, and I need to change the name of the class here. Let's indicate that the name will be, for example, password hasher. I press enter, and you can see that it has correctly created the class called password hasher here. Well, with this, we have confirmed that it also works correctly from the terminal. I will close these additional windows, and the next thing I will discuss is the window called the chat window. This window is an additional one, apart from the inline chat we saw earlier, and it is an independent window that can help us chat with the AI about our project. If you want to open it quickly, you can do so by pressing Ctrl-Alt-I. And here we have the chat window. I can see that we have a previous conversation, which was started when we asked the AI about a specific method. You could also open this window from the Copilot icon. We have different options to open a chat window. If we want to start a new conversation, you can do so with the plus icon, which then initiates a new session to ask questions about the project, etc. As part of this window, one of the first things you need to configure is how you want to work with the chat window. You can see that there are currently 3 modes. You can see it here in this selector. We have the Ask mode, the Edit mode, and the Agent mode. Let's start with the Ask mode. In fact, as you may recall, when we executed inline chat for code explanation, this method called ask was used. And this mode is optimized for asking questions about your code base, general code questions, and technology concepts using natural language. This means you don't necessarily have to ask questions about your source code. You can ask about whatever you want. Let's ask some general questions. I will change the model here because there are premium models and non-premium models. For example, we have the GPT-4o model. I will switch to this model and ask, for example, what is the factory method design pattern? You can see how Copilot starts to process what this design pattern is and gives us a quick response about the design pattern, its key features, its structure, and even an example in C# that shows us the implementation of this design pattern in case we want to implement it, allowing us to study more about this design pattern. Alternatively, we could ask the AI model directly how we could implement this design pattern in our project. And that is what we will do next. We will ask, how can I implement this pattern into my project? And once again, GitHub Copilot will initiate the thought process. Basically, what it's telling us here is a series of steps by which we could implement this design pattern in our project. You can see that it has generated a series of different files, or rather, a series of code snippets that we could add in different files to carry out the implementation of this pattern. I am going to quickly implement these interfaces and those classes, so I will fast forward the video a bit. Done! I have finished implementing the different changes that Copilot showed me. And here we have, in this specific case, the updated program class, where the factory, which is the password generator, is being used. You can see that we have correctly implemented each of the different classes that have been filled in. The password hasher class is not included because it was the class I created as a demonstration. The only thing left is to check that everything works correctly. So I will do a .NET build. And you can see that we have a successful build with warnings, but ultimately a successful build. You could even run .NET Run to see how the application looks. And we see that it asks us for a type of password. We will specify that we want a special password of 8 characters, and here we have this password correctly generated, confirming that the application works properly. The next mode we are going to discuss is the Edit mode. I will open the chat window once again, close the terminal, And you can see that as part of the chat window, we have some additional features such as the ability to switch to edit mode. This indicates to me that a new session is going to start, as it is a completely different remote change. And as part of this window, notice that we can perform some additional options such as adding context. In case we want to add additional files or data sources, we could do so, for example, by adding a folder obtained from search results or getting changes in Git, specifying a particular prompt using terminal selections or utilizing a specific class. And well, we have many places we could consult, including a website in case we want or need to do so. We then have the option to add context, as well as the option to dictate a series of instructions in case we do not want to type everything and would prefer to dictate more quickly using voice. You could change the model, as we have seen earlier. And well, the ask mode we have seen previously has proven to be very useful. We have seen how it has provided us with a new perspective on how to improve the code by applying a design pattern. However, the process of creating files manually does not turn out well, as it takes time and can lead to errors where we might not create a requested file, etc. Fortunately, there is this mode called Edit, which allows us to use natural language to make edits across multiple files in your project. And unlike the Ask mode here, Copilot will automatically edit the files in the editor, allowing you to review the changes and approve or reject them if you don't want. To verify this, I will copy and paste the prompt that I will paste here. This prompt states that I have a console application that allows password generation, and I need to separate the password generation logic into a .NET library because I want to use it on other platforms. Please help me solve this problem. Let's indicate that we want to execute this. Notice how GitHub Copilot automatically starts to create an action plan. Something interesting we can observe is that it begins to show us a series of classes that will be modified with changes which will be applied automatically. We can see that we have a series of different classes that will be updated. We see that the main application will be updated, commands will be executed, etc. What this has caused, as you can see, is that in the solution, we now have a new project called Password Library, and we will indicate that we want to keep these changes. Let's review this password library. In this specific case, what has happened is that a new class called Password Generator has been created, and we only have this method, but all the other files remain here. We could indicate once again that we want to improve this project. We will specify that all files related to password generation should be moved to the new class library project. Before executing this command, I will change the model because I want to use a reasoning model that will likely yield better results. This is a premium model, so I select it, and I will initiate the execution of this instruction to see what happens. You can see how GitHub Copilot starts to engage in a reasoning process. You can also observe that it is a little slower because a reasoning process is taking place to obtain the best information and code to be applied to the project to fulfill the instruction we have given. Okay, you can see that we have a step-by-step solution here, and this begins the implementation process of the solution. You can see that different classes are being created, that various interfaces are being created, and that there are changes in the files we have available. And basically, this continues processing the information, generating classes, and performing refactorings, everything necessary for our project to function correctly. Here you can see how program.cs is being updated, and you can see that we have a summary that 7 files have been changed. Let's review the files. You can see that as part of the password generator, we have different files. You can see that Password Generator Live has also created a series of different files and classes that will allow us to have certain interoperability with other types of projects. This way, we have created or rather separated responsibilities into 2 distinct projects. We will keep all the changes and indicate that we have finished using the chat window, but you can see that this has left us with a problem. And basically, it indicates that this namespace was not found. Let's ask Copilot why the namespace was not found if it was supposed to be generated correctly. And you can see that this is happening because we forgot to add a reference to the project. And while it indicates that it's due to the need to install a NuGet package, we know that it's because we need to create a reference to the common library project. So let's indicate that we want to regenerate this response. And here, in this specific case, a correct response is already being generated, as it indicates that we have to add the additional projects to the current project. So let's insert these projects in the terminal. In case we encounter any issues, we will pass this information to the chat window. And something quite curious has happened with this specific file. You can see that the target framework has changed. In my case, I'm going to indicate that I don't want this change. I'm not interested in changing the target framework, and we'll keep all the other changes. We see that this time we no longer have the issue we encountered earlier. Let's try to compile this project. And you can see that we once again have a successful compilation, which means we have achieved the goal of separating this password generator into different projects. Now let's look at the last mode of the chat window, which is the agent mode. This agent mode allows you to use natural language to define a high-level task and initiate an agent-assisted editing session to carry it out. Copilot automatically plans the work that needs to be done and determines the relevant files and context to be used. After this, it performs the editing in the necessary files and even invokes tools to complete the requests you make. A significant advantage of this mode is that the agent monitors all outputs from edits and tools, iterating to resolve any issues that may arise. So it is an even more powerful mode. How can we use it? Well, from the chat window, we will indicate that we want to use agent mode. And to test this mode, I will paste a slightly more complicated prompt. We have been increasing in complexity as we have created different prompts, but this time I am indicating that I have a solution. I have a class library project that handles password generation, and I also have a console application project that uses this library. In my company, I have been tasked with creating a web interface using Blazor 9, but I have no idea how to start this project. Please create a Blazor application that looks amazing for me. I'm going to make a change here to the more powerful model, which is Claude 3.7 Sonnet, and I will start the application generation to see what happens. You can see that once again, a reasoning process is carried out about what needs to be done to complete that task. And here we have some interaction with the user. Instead of just saying that we should execute a command, for example, in the console, it is automatically indicating which specific command needs to be executed in the terminal. Let's indicate that we want to execute the command. And you can see that this has automatically executed something in the console. We have a correct response, that's why we have this check indicating that everything is fine so far. If there had been any issues, the agent would have automatically taken care of resolving them. Let's indicate that we want to continue with this task, which is generating the Blazor project. We click on Continue. Here you can see that we have encountered a problem. So directly code will take this instruction or output and will handle the correction by executing a different command for which it requests permission to execute it. We indicate that we do want to execute this new command. And well, what this has done is first make a change at a higher level to then create now the Blazor project. And let's execute this. And you can see that this has successfully created a new project as part of the solution. If we review the files, we already have the project that has been created here. Let's indicate that we want to execute this new command that code is asking for, and we'll give it a few seconds. Here we see the next step, which is basically adding the different references of the projects. Let's click on Continue. Next, we see how a new Razor page called com.razor is being created. Let's give it a few seconds. Here, the changes have been applied to com.razor. They are still being applied. Notice how it is generating code. Finally, it asks us if we want to keep the changes. Let's indicate that we do. The next step is to make this page even prettier by using Bootstrap icons. For that, we will add Bootstrap icons to the project. Different files are being updated. You may occasionally see a prompt like this. If you want to continue iterating, as it says there has been an ongoing issue for some time and you can continue iterating, or you can send a new message to refine the prompt. In my case, I will indicate that I want to continue iterating to improve the app CSS file. Here, it tells us that a new page, a new about page, will be created. Let's indicate that we want to continue. Here, the same model is recommending that I create a new page for the application that allows us to validate how strong the password is. Let's click on Continue to see how it looks. Now the model recommends creating a password history page. Let's click once more on Continue to create it. We can see that the next step is to integrate all the pages that have been created into the home page. Now, a folder is also created for the services, for shared services. We click on Continue. A new password history service is created. Now the service implementation is created. The service is registered in program.cs to enable dependency injection. And after completing all the modifications we have seen, the last step is to launch the Blazor application with all the changes made to see if it can be executed correctly and if we can view it in the browser. So let's indicate that we want to continue to attempt to launch the application. You can see that in the console we encountered an error. Surely, the model will interpret this data to correct or resolve the issue you see on screen. In this case, we see that it does not. Let's try copying that error we had. Let's paste it again. Once we have executed several iterations, we can see that the application is now running correctly. Let's navigate to the website and see that we have a password generator application that looks quite good and complete. And this has been generated thanks to the initial code we instructed it to generate. So here we have, for example, a generation of an alphanumeric password or one with special characters. I will indicate that I want a password with special characters and a length of 16, for example. And if we indicate that we want to generate the password, we can see that currently no password is being generated. And before you think this is not working correctly, the actual problem is that we have indicated this has to be a web application. So for it to function correctly, we need to add the type of interactivity. We will indicate that we need to add a render mode equal to interactive server. We will do this for all Razor pages. Let's go again to the terminal and indicate that we want to run this application once more. Once we have recompiled the application, we see that it now works satisfactorily and correctly. So we have this selection to indicate how large the password should be. We have the option to specify if we want to include special characters. We click on Generate Password, and we see that it is correctly creating this password in a very simple way. All this graphical interface that looks quite complex was created by the AI model. The truth is that the graphical interface looks quite phenomenal. We even have a meter to know how strong this password is. We can copy the password to the clipboard and we can easily navigate to the password history. We have another nice table that is using Bootstrap, surely behind the scenes, showing us the passwords that have been generated and when they were generated. We can perform actions like revealing the password, copying the password, deleting the password, clearing the history, etc. I find this password generator truly amazing. We also have this password validator to check how strong a password is. For example, if I input a very simple, easy password, we have this page, this tool that basically tells us how strong the password is. Here we have a special analysis performed on the password. And we even have a comparison table to see how we could create a password that is, well, basically a strong password. A very strong password, moderate, weak, or very weak. We have additional notes. The truth is that I really like the application that has been created. It looks very well crafted, very professional, and quite complex, all based on a very simple class and a very simple method we created to generate passwords. We have seen how we started creating the application practically from scratch. We made it more complete, more complex, using the tools in Visual Studio Code. And now we have this fabulous tool that looks fantastic. I loved it. Let me know in the comments if you like this application as well, and what you think of this way of programming through natural language. I'll see you in the next video.